Again, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out for the program today. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So
It's a
let's,
pleasure to be with you.
yeah, it's wonderful. So let's begin our journey with something I always start with, and it's the COVID question. 6 years ago, it changed the world, changed our lives. How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you work and do things today?
Well, I mean, COVID was a it was a time that I think we started to realize how valuable it is, like being in the community that you are, the people surrounding you, and what importance that they play. But I think we saw in general how if we all are concentrated on what's important in life, we can get through and be able to manage and be able to be a helping hand to one another. I think that a lot of the, noise that you just have in daily life just went away at that time, and people were more concentrated on, what is our direction in life? What is the purpose? What is our purpose on, on earth? What are we doing with it? How are we um, helping others? And so I think that it was a time that a lot of people started to take a deeper dive into, what is the, in essence, what are we doing with our lives?
Yeah.
Um, for me, it was a critical time because aside from dealing with COVID ourselves, um, it was also a major concern, the situation inside of Iran, because the Iranian regime was just coming out of a major uprising into end of 2019, and they actually um, allowed the spread of COVID purposely um, to be able to then be able to just suppress everyone and send them into their homes as a means to counter the momentum in society. I remember that in March 2020, there was a like parliamentary elections or so in Iran. The regime had news from like a week or so before that there were actually cases of COVID in Tehran or in different cities in Iran. They purposely did not give any warnings on it or anything like that. And they allowed those elections to happen. And that is when COVID spread in Iran. And yeah, and after that, they actually would not allow vaccines into the country for months after everyone else was vaccinated, everyone was getting their second vaccines or whatnot. Iran was not allowing it to come in because they looked at it as a godsend for them because everyone had to stay in lockdown and no one could come to the streets and no one could do anything against them. And unfortunately, um, you know, the rate of the casualties of COVID in Iran were one of the highest percentage in the world because
Wow.
of that. I think um, I will have to double check the numbers, but I think it was about 600,000 that we recorded deaths during COVID in Iran. And yeah, unfortunately, it was a very devastating time for people inside of Iran. But it was also another sign for everyone that this regime truly sees no borders when it comes to doing whatever it can to you know um, just be able to safeguard its own power and to stay in power. And I think that was one of the things that just still sticks out in my mind.
So when did you leave Iran? Was it around that time?
Well, actually, I've never actually been to Iran.
Okay.
I was born and raised in the US.
Okay.
My parents came to the US before the revolution.
Gotcha.
I was born in the DC area and grew up there. And yeah, especially because of my parents' activism, I could never go to Iran. My father was killed by the Iranian regime when I was 7 in summer of 1988. And because he was a very prominent writer and a human rights activist. And yeah, that summer, the summer of 1988 was a turning point for people inside Iran because that summer the Iranian regime executed 30,000 political prisoners in just a matter of 5, 6 weeks.
Wow.
And with that, they were able to spread complete fear in society and silence everyone for about 11 years, adding to its lifeline.
Which is a part of the work that you're doing, the wonderful work you're doing. So if if I was to put you in front of 13-year-olds right now and you had to explain what you do on a daily basis, how do you explain the work that you're doing today?
Well, I think the most important thing to tell a teenager is maybe like the way that I thought as a teenager myself when I became active. I think I started going to Congress when I was 12, asking members of Congress to, just support the people of Iran. But what's important is to know that, these freedoms that we have, they're not given automatically. There are a lot of people in different countries who are denied those basic rights that we take for granted on a daily basis. The freedom of speech, being able to choose what you wear, your own attire, your deciding your own path in life. These are things that a lot of people are denied, and Iran is one of those countries. Unfortunately, in Iran, children your age, um, young teenagers are executed by this regime. They're killed in the streets. We had, Fatima Misbah. She was only 13 years old when she was executed in 1981, and she became like a symbol for people of Iran. But that still continues till this day. And as we speak, you see it in the uprisings in Iran, where the Gen Z of Iran and they are, you know, taking center stage, and they are the ones who are very active against this regime, fighting this regime. But a lot of them, it comes with a grave price. Just last month, we are seeing a new wave of executions. People who just went to protest in January, and they have already been executed. Some as young as 18, 19-year-olds. Some being, sports champions, having like brightest futures ahead of them, some being like the elite students of universities, graduating top of their class to then be executed by this regime. So that is the plight of people inside of Iran. So what we do is we try to raise awareness on that and try to be their voice and try to do everything that we can to be able to overthrow this regime and be able to establish a secular democratic republic in Iran. So our message in general is there is a solution to Iran. It's not war and it's not appeasement. It's supporting the people of Iran to be able to create change. And we're not stuck between choosing between the current dictatorship, which is a theocracy, and the previous dictatorship which was a monarchy. We want to move forward to a secular democratic republic.
So, what's your take on what's going on right now? I think a lot of people in America are kind of hemorrhaging on the idea of everything that's happening. There's so many things between immigration and all of these other issues that we're trying to grapple with right now. And then he we get into a war with Iran, and no one wanted it. But what you're talking about right now, I think I've heard that pretty loud and clear. The regime has been very oppressive. The people are not treated well. But what is your take holistically on how the United States started this? Well, I mean, there was even a debate if it's a war or an invasion or however you want to term it, and what's going on right now. Give me an idea, kind of from the inside of where you're at, as to what's going on.
Well, I think what's important is to realize that this isn't something that has brewed overnight.
Right.
It's just like a whole process. And that process and those decisions throughout the past 4 decades have led us to the point that we are today. Um, Unfortunately, for over 40 years, there has been the policy of appeasement towards the regime. And in effort to try to strike a deal with this regime time time and time again, the people of Iran and their organized resistance have been used as the bargaining chips at the table. So the Iranian people have paid a grave price for the cause of appeasement, but history has taught us that, unfortunately, appeasement finally leads to a war when you're dealing with a brutal dictatorship, because they don't understand diplomacy, or they don't want to cooperate with the laws of diplomacy. They're not reformable. I mean, a viper never gives birth to a dove, right? So this regime has only been able to buy time for itself. Khamenei used to mock that, you know, these different US administrations, they come and go. I'm the one who's constant. So I just have to drag my feet for 4 years and you're gone. And the next, administration is there. And 2 years of it, you're busy with your, electoral campaign. So, you just want to have, be in good favors at that time or whatever. And that has just added on to the lifeline of the regime. But unfortunately, more than that, I think it's just been the price that has been paid from the pockets of the Iranian people for those negotiations and for those talks, which has been very grave. But the people of Iran, they felt, I mean, the threat of Iran's nuclear program is a serious threat. That is why that our organization, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, which is a parliament in exile, it is the one that actually revealed Iran's nuclear program for the first time to the world in 2002. Unfortunately, everyone turned a blind eye, or they have been really dragging their feet at the negotiation table till the time that it's, becomes a threat to the world. And that is where we are today. And the reality is that if you look at everything that was happening on the ground inside of Iran right before the start of this war, it was showing that, yes, the people of Iran want change, but they believe that change comes from within Iran,
Gotcha.
by the people. It's not reform in the system, it's overthrow of the system, but it has to come from the people of Iran.
Yep.
Because we had a major uprising that started on December 28th, 2025. And it was over Iran's economic crisis. And it started with the strike of the bazaar, which is like the merchants are like the backbone of Iran's economy, kind of like, I guess, the Wall Street in the US.
Sure.
And the strike started with them, but the students joined the strike, and protest turned it into nationwide protest the next day. And from the first few hours, it was clear that, the economic crisis and everything else is just an excuse, but this was that spark to be able to come to the streets and to, want to create that change and overthrow the regime. Unfortunately, those protests were met with brutal force.
Yeah.
The regime shut down the internet, and they just killed with open arms in the streets. Thousands of people were killed. We do not have exact numbers of how many people were killed because of the internet blackout. At that time, it was 19 days of internet blackout after those killings. And we, as the Iranian resistance was able to gather the names of over 2,600 people who were killed in the streets. But with that, the regime started complete martial law. There was no method of communication, even within the country. And so even you couldn't send a text message, basics. With that, they were able to create this, extreme silence, and also to be able to suppress the situation for a few weeks. But the regime knew that, they have hit a place of no return with those uprisings, because the people of Iran were just fed up. And people of Iran also learned something, because if you look in the last decade, we've had 4 major uprisings in Iran. Each time people come to the streets with the spark, and then it turns into a nationwide uprising and protest, but then the regime uses brutal force, kills hundreds of people, thousands of people, and then people are forced back into their homes. This time around, everyone's like, look, we can't let that cycle continue to repeat itself. We need to understand that, look, no one's going to hand us freedom in a silver platter. We have to pay the price for it. But we need to be on the offensive. We can't just be, allow them to just kill us, in the streets and then push us back into our homes. What we need to do is, first of all, we saw on the ground, you could see like this organized momentum in the protest. It was being organized. It was being, there were these units, these groups that were organizing on the ground, and also they were on the offensive. Like they were disarming the suppressive forces. They were attacking them back with their own with their own weapons, or like with just stones or whatever that they could find. But they were fighting back, and they were able to push back the suppressive forces, and that is what created a lot of fear for the regime, because they're like this. These people are just bent on just having this regime overthrown. After the uprising, like after the killings, you saw the families who were mourning their loved ones. They turned the memorial services or the burials into an act of defiance. Instead of mourning them, they started celebrating their lives. They started, turning it into a place to make a pledge to continue the fight, until the dawn of freedom in Iran. And that resilience is what really scared the regime. We saw in Iran, there's this thing that they hold ceremonies like on the 40th day of someone's passing. And about 10 days before the start of the war was that time period. It was like the 40th day ceremonies of those who had been killed in January. And we saw throughout Iran these huge ceremonies that were coming together, even though the regime was arresting people for taking part. They were present in the memorial services to try to stop anyone who tries to chant or do anything, but still people came out and they turned those memorial services into forms of resistance. And then we had on February 22nd, so this is 6 days before the start of the war, universities resumed classes, because from the uprising till then, all classes had been held online, and all campuses had been, college campuses had been shut down. And so it was the day that people were returning to classes. And on that first day, protests broke out in universities across Iran. And within 3-4 days, the regime was not able to curb the protest, even though they had closed the gates. They were attacking the students in the university campus area, but still people were still, defiant, and they were fighting back. And then we had 5 days before the start of the war. This was like a turning point. 250 members of resistance units. Resistance units are part of a strategy of the Iranian resistance that was put together by the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran about 10 years ago. So they've been working 12 years ago. So they've been working on this creating like small networks throughout Iran, underground networks of people who are local in their given cities, but they carry out different activities. On one hand, raising awareness, like for instance, last year in 2025, they carried out 13,000 awareness campaigns throughout the country. But they also carry out like operations targeting the suppressive forces or like their centers. Last year, they carried out 4,092 operations. And during the uprisings, they carried out like 630 operations, which they were organizing on the ground, as I said. So they were, these 250 members of the resistance units, they carried out an attack on the headquarters of Khamenei. That is the most secure location in all of Iran, and it is protected by over 8,000 security forces. Wow. And the fact that they were able to penetrate into that compound area, that had a message for people in Iran. First of all, it hadn't been done in 2 decades. In over 2 decades. And the second was it showed people that the regime is in a much weaker position that it tries to present itself. because they were on high alert at that time because they were afraid that the war would start any day. So they were on heightened security and high alert, but still these 250 people were able to infiltrate. Yes, unfortunately, a few of them were killed, some were arrested, but still that message that it had for the people of Iran, they're like, oh, so from now on, this is going to be the new norm. You need to have, you need to move forward with on 2 feet. So on one hand, we're going to have like protests, because the student protests were going on at that same time simultaneously, protest and then organized like armed resistance in a way against the regime. So these two have to go hand in hand to be able to overthrow this regime. But 5 days later, the war started. So when you have bombs over your head, it's not possible. And right now there is complete martial law in Iran. It's day 67 today of the internet blackout in Iran. You can't even make phone calls to Iran right now. They can call you from a landline, not from their phones, but from a landline. But the calls are very short. Like after a few minutes, it gets disconnected.
Wow.
So it's very limited information that's coming outside of Iran. And also they have like checkpoints set up like everywhere. They say if you want to go like a path that's like 30 minutes, you will be stopped probably like twice by these checkpoints. And in the checkpoints, they're not just checking your ID or your car, they actually check your phone. And what are they checking for? They check to see like certain apps. When is the last time that it was used?
Wow.
So are you somehow, you know, going around the internet blackout? Because if those apps have been active during this blackout, that shows that you're using some kind of a system to be able to, go around it. And if you don't have your phone with you, that in itself is suspicious. So you're probably hiding something and you could be arrested. And so there have been a lot of arrests in recent weeks. And we are seeing now a new wave of executions in Iran that started with the Persian New Year, practically simultaneous with the ceasefire, because the Iranian regime knows, and they've known this, that with just these military operations like bombings and whatnot, they're not going to be overthrown because this system is not a classical dictatorship. Like for instance, with a classical dictatorship, the scenario like Venezuela works. You remove that top figure, and then that system collapses. But with this regime, it has a whole apparatus intact, so it's not going to collapse like that.
Yeah.
You can remove that top head, but then they will just replace him with someone else. The same way when Khomeini died, Khomeini replaced him.
Yeah.
So the regime knew that, and also they also know that Iran. I mean, even if you look at it like completely from a military perspective or geographically, Iran is a very large country. It's like 3 times the size of Iraq, 4 times the population. We have every possible terrain in Iran. We have the desert, we have forestry, we have mountain ranges, we have very, populated metropolitan areas. So troops on the ground is not very likely in Iran. So the regime going in, they knew that. And like, for instance, if the war did continue, because of the system that they're using, they're just using like their drones. Well, these drones that each cost like, they don't cost really that much, between $500 to $2,000 each. They are being used up against like very expensive equipment from the US. So it's, for them, for the regime, they could just drag this out and they did have enough drones to drag this out for another 6-7 months at least. So and then they're working to create more. And the fact that Iran is the #1 state sponsor of terrorism. So what did they do? The war did not stay in Iran's borders. They attacked 12 other countries in the region to be able to create so much chaos that everyone's just like, you know what, this is going to lead to a world war. So let's just stop, So the regime knew that's why they weren't worried about that. But the one thing that they do fear is at the end of the day, they know that the only power that can overthrow this regime is the people and their organized resistance. So that is why we're seeing this new wave of executions. Unfortunately, we've had, like, for instance, 10 members of resistance units or supporters of the People's Majority Organization of Iran have been executed, and also I think it's now 14 of the protesters, people who were just arrested mostly in January. One or two of them were people who were arrested in 2022, 2023 uprisings, but they have been executed in the past few days. So unfortunately, right now, I think every Iranian is practically every morning they wake up checking their phone to see has anyone been executed, because the regime is carrying out this wave of political executions right now, and they are making a note of it to actually announce it on a daily basis. And there's a website for their judiciary that they announce it, and because they want to spread fear in society that way.
So we really ran away with our time. This has been absolutely fascinating, and I think this is information that we all need to know in this country. I don't think we really understand the scope of what's happening in Iran and what our involvement is. So is there any way that we can do a part two next week to delve a little bit more into the work that you're doing and expand a little bit on some of these points that we've laid out?
Sure, that
Okay.
sounds great.
So my question before we get out here is, how can people support what you're doing? How can people find out, reach out, any of the good business? What's the best way?
Well, actually, for those who are in the US, there is actually going to be a rally in DC in about 2 weeks on the 16th
Okay.
of May. So you can join and voice your support and solidarity with the people of Iran. For more information, you could visit OYAC, it's Organization of Iranian American Communities. It's oiac.org. And they have chapters in over 40 states. So
Okay.
you're probably covered there. If you reach out to them, they could put you in contact with local chapters. And also do whatever you can to, echo the voice of the people of Iran, um, you know, raise awareness on these executions, and also on the message of the people of Iran that the solution is neither war nor appeasement. It's supporting the people of Iran,
Yep.
and the people of Iran want to be able to move forward in the 21st century to a secular democratic republic.
What an enlightening perspective on something that's so huge right now for all of us to understand. So I do, like I said, next week we'll get together and do a part two, expand a little bit more on the work that you're doing and what we can all do to help the cause and to get to that better place. So thank you so much for taking a minute out today. We'll catch up next week and keep doing the wonderful work. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be with you.
And